Some people have some questions. Some people have, yes, sorry. Questions? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a question maybe, but not the one you wanted. But you know, I wanted to ask about purification for my own.
Yes.
And as we were talking already yesterday about it, I was this morning rummaging everywhere to find a bit of paper that I had of how you can make it, I mean, formation. And maybe that is not so important, but for me to start with this again, I would like to make it as good as possible.
The purification practice.
Yeah. So maybe you will tell us anyhow now how, in what form, if you start with taking refuge.
No, there's different ways that they are presented. Sometimes in the formal practices you will see that sometimes refuge starts first and sometimes other things. The way I presented it is the way, again, it's not in here, but if people will email Katya, I will send her a document with this practice in it, with the teachings on emptiness in it, with the teachings on the non-virtues, with the purification, all those teachings in it, that will be in it, and that will be in a way to do it. A way you start with the regret, then you take refuge, then you do the practice, and then you vow not to do it again. It's all there. It's a formal way to do, so you can use that as your basis. So you need to email Katya, and she will send it to you.
Thank you.
All right.
That's
Thank you so much. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
I would like to study Tibetan Buddhism in Nepal or India.
Yeah.
Could you recommend a place, or do you know someone who knows?
Well, there's not that many places, I would say, in India and in Nepal where you can study it seriously in English. It's mostly in Tibetan.
Oh.
Whereas the places to study seriously in Europe or in Australia are in English. So, for example, the FPMT Centre in Italy has a very intensive 7-year master's program that people study. Then in many of the centres, there's these 5- and 7-year programs of intensive study. Some are more intensive than others. In Australia too, at one of our centres, Chenrezig Institute, where there's another as well, but many lay people, there's a very intensive 5-year program. So there are quite a few in the West, and that's just in the FPMT, the ones that I know. But I think in Nepal and India, there's the main ways where many Westerners are studying, they're studying in Tibetan at the monasteries.
Oh.
There's no other place that I can think of that's got a really intensive program. There might be, but what I know, I don't know.
Are those centers you just mentioned,
Yeah.
they're also well recommended?
Ones I mentioned,
It's
the
not
ones.
like better to go there or there, it's just the Sangha and the teachers which matter. It's not, I don't have to be necessarily I don't have to be necessarily in India.
Not at all, no. In fact, as I'm saying, the better courses for people who speak English are in the West. I'm giving an example of the centres in the organisation that I'm part of, Lama Zopa, FPMT. There's Italy, Institute of Lama Tsongkhapa, for example, near Pisa, big place, a little village called Pomaya. There's, if you look on, there's a good start, that one. Institute of Lama Tsongkhapa. Look at that one. They have a 7-year program. I don't know how you can enter into it, whether you can enter into it in the middle, I've got no idea. But just start doing your research, or even start researching on fpmt.org. There's many programs there. But that's a good start. There are other organisations as well that are for you to look for. I don't know them.
Okay.
Yeah? Okay, good. What else, people? Any other questions before we continue? Any other questions about purification or about the vows?
Just sorry, to refer to this question, sorry. We will have a Lamrim course starting in autumn, 1.5 year. We spend leading it, so it's FPMT course also.
Okay.
So
Any other questions?
Yes,
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes, yes, Al.
I'm quite new to Buddhism, and we were talking about karma and the rebirth, and I was just wondering if it isn't an I.
If what?
You don't have the concept of I, a person or a self. Who is it that is reborn?
Were you here yesterday?
Yes.
You were here yesterday?
Yes. But I still don't
So, who said there's no I? I never said that.
know.
Who told you that?
I thought it was like that.
No inherent I.
No inherent I.
So we have to understand what that means. And what that means is, there is no I that doesn't depend this or that. It's very abstract to us because we don't think. You see, what Buddha's saying is, we have a deep misconception in the mind. This is this ignorance I mentioned, this marika, this ego grasping, that clings to a wrong sense of I. So we don't know that we do that. So that's why when we hear it, we're puzzled. So it's like there is a right eye and a wrong eye. There is something existing, but not the way we think it is. There is a cup, but not the way we think there's a cup.
Yes.
There is an eye, but not the way we think there's an eye. So when he says that we're clinging to a self-existent I, we're clinging to an inherent I, we go, huh? We haven't got a clue what he's talking about. So that's what we have to think about. So there is an I, conventionally speaking, but there is no inherent I. That's the words. Of course, it's puzzling to us. So the I that continues from life to life is, of course, the conventional I. So you have to learn to understand these. One has to understand the use of these terms. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to think more about that.
Precisely. Yeah. Precisely.
Yeah.
Or put it very simply, what continues into the next life. Like I said, in the Vajrayana kind of model, what's your name?
Gabriella?
Gabriella. We've got, Gabriella has gross consciousness, which is her thoughts, her feelings, her emotions on the basis of this gross body. Now in the West, that's all we think there is, isn't it? And when you stop breathing, that's the end of Gabriella.
Yeah.
Well, for the Buddha, that's the end of the gross level of Gabriella. The person known as Gabriella, the thoughts, feelings, emotions, her love, her hate, her good, her bad, her being good at music, whatever, those tendencies, those experiences. When you stop breathing, that part's finished. But your mind continues at a subtler level called subtle consciousness. And the physical level of you, remember I said that for this model, mind and the four elements are inextricably linked. So there's the subtle consciousness, and then that gets more subtle, more subtle, more subtle, until eventually you get to the subtlest level of what we call Gabriella, which is very subtle consciousness. And that's conjoined with this very subtle wind energy. These are inextricably linked. So before Gabriella stopped breathing, the karmic, it's highly complex how it happens, but let's say she died peacefully in the past life and you had a virtuous practice, the virtuous karmic seed was triggered that would be the one that would throw, they call it throw your consciousness into your mother's present human womb. Probably, a few weeks after your consciousness left that previous body. So it was all programmed with your tendencies, with your experiences, with your environmental karma, all the tendencies, all the karmic seeds were programmed in that consciousness, and then that very subtle consciousness with very subtle wind energy continued and then found its way to your mummy's human womb. So the continuity is like that. That never ends and never begins. And it's continuous, goes from life to life to life to experience to experience to experience. So the continuity of consciousness and the continuity of the subtle physical energies is what is an unbroken continuity. But one life we label the package Gabriella, one life you label the package dog, one life you label the package something else.
Yes. But then you have nirvana.
Pardon?
Then you have nirvana, and then that's...
What's nirvana, as you understand it? What's that mean?
I think when you stop doing this, getting
No,
rebirth.
not as simple as that, no.
No?
Nirvana is meaning when you have realized emptiness and then through your practice have perfected that realization and removed all the obstacles to your own liberation, that is when you have achieved your nirvana. And that point you don't, even before that point, you don't need to be reborn. And when you've finished and achieved your nirvana, if that's all you're doing, then you won't get reborn. Your mind will just go to a subtle state of bliss. But if you are practicing on the bodhisattva path, even when you don't need to be reborn, because you cut the causes of rebirth, but because you have this huge compassion and bodhicitta, you will choose to continue to be reborn. And then eventually you'll become a Buddha, or you will achieve the nirvana of the Mahayana. And that's when you become a Buddha. Like I was describing before, you become one of those, and then you'll be zapping around the universe, manifesting in billions of forms to benefit sentient
Okay,
beings.
so then you exist, but in another way.
Pardon?
Yeah, I got,
Are you sure?
No, yes, I think so. With
Repeat
that part, yeah.
Repeat it what I said.
No, I was thinking about this last part. Because I had an understanding that I don't know where you disappear, but that kind of disappearance with nirvana.
Well, no, in the Theravada,
Yeah.
the Theravada teachings,
Mm.
in the Hinayana teachings that are taught in this world,
Mm.
in certain countries,
Yeah.
the interpretation is that most humans only have the potential to achieve their own nirvana, and when you do achieve your nirvana, and when you die in that life, you are finished. You're
Yeah.
gone. There's nothing left. Your mind has ceased. But the Mahayana would disagree and say your mind can never cease.
Mm. I didn't know that difference.
Yeah, me too.
Yes, really.
But the Mahayana says what happens is your mind will go to a subtle state of bliss, and then one day Buddha will come along and tap you on the shoulder and say, okay baby, come onto the Mahayana path now, become a bodhisattva, become a Buddha so you can benefit sentient beings. So it's a big deal. Sorry. Okay, so let's look at emptiness a bit more. Like I'm saying, all the teachings that you would think about, all the teachings about the mind, karma, purification, morality, it's all leading, and then meditation, looking at your mind, becoming your own therapist, lessening the delusions, it's all leading to emptiness. Everything leads to emptiness, you know. Everything is priming our mind, especially like we talked before, the more we think about karma in the way you described, that everything is a result of what you've done. There's nothing out there from its own side. It's appearing to you in the way you created. This is proving, this is implying emptiness, that there is nothing from its own side as this or that. This is meaning, it leads you to understand emptiness. So understanding karma is a practical and extremely helpful way to understand how things are empty. But like I said yesterday, more specifically, the very first level of dependent arising, there's 3 levels of dependent arising, okay? The first one is that, and using the example of the eye, it could be the cup, it could be the clock, it could be the book, whatever object you posit. So here we're positing the object called I or self, the conventional existent object called I or self. Then to think about karma in relation to this self is the first level of that I come into existence in dependence upon countless causes and conditions. So, in general, the West would agree with that. You come into existence in dependence upon many causes and conditions. But in the West, we'd only say that the external things are the cause. Mummy and daddy and Liz are food and healthy and blah. Buddha would agree with that. But the way to think about it in relation to oneself, to stop grasping at the poor self-pitying me, is to understand the one of karma, which is your mind plays a role. What you did in the past in your mind are the crucial causes and conditions that produce you now. Whereas when we think of the usual feeling of I, it's the feeling of being a victim, the feeling that somebody else made me and put me on this earth. So like, I didn't ask to get born. Hey, not my fault. That's the feeling of ego. So as soon as you think about causes and conditions, every time someone is kind to you, you realize it's not just good luck. You created that from your past morality. So you own it more. Every time someone is mean to you, it's not just bad luck. You created that by your immorality. So it forces you into the center of responsibility as being the main cause of what you experience. So it's a very practical way to help us understand there is no I from its own side. The I is the result of causes and conditions. And guess what? They're causes and conditions done by my mind in the past. So it really brings a lot of courage and accountability, thinking about causes and conditions. As the first level of dependent arising of this particular object called I. Now the second one, like we talked yesterday, is that I is nothing other than the parts, all the bits and pieces. That I is the result of all the pieces coming together. That you won't find any I among any of those bits and pieces. Among the arm and the eye and the nose and the anger and the love and the kindness and the subtle consciousness and the hair and the bones. That I is made up of countless parts. But this is where the one we really need to do some analysis on, because the feeling we have is that there is a part called I that owns the other parts. This is a very strong feeling we have. So this is the crucial kind of analysis we have to learn to do, like we were discussing yesterday. You know, when you start to analyze the experience of I am holding a cup or I am watching my breath, the feeling we have is there's a piece called I whose hand is holding the cup. There's a piece called I whose mind is watching the breath. We still feel there's this real I there, but the more we do the analysis, and that's a really good way to do it, you simply analyze that action called watching my breath. Standing on the ground, sitting in the chair, running down the road. The feeling we always have is there's a real I in there who makes the legs and arms run down the road, like a boss, you know? Like the landlord, like the puppeteer, the creator, like that. That's the dualistic view that Buddha is arguing with. We believe that we need that extra piece, you know? But all he's saying is the parts do just fine on their own. They don't need a person to be running it. And that's a big shock to us. Yeah. Like the world can't be just putting itself together. It's got to have a boss. And that's one of the commonest arguments of people who have faith in God. The world is so amazing, it's got to come from some intelligence. This is the dualistic view that Buddha is arguing with. That exact view. He says you don't need it. It's an unnecessary embellishment. It's quite shocking because it's instinctively what we think. And all our, like I said, all our language reinforces this. And then we can see when all the emotion comes. I did not do that. You did that to me. Look at the pain. You know? So you've got to use all these arguments to break down ego's misconception, which in the beginning just sounds stupid. Huh? You know, what are you talking about? You know, for example, so simple. When you nearly fall over the mountain, fall down the mountain, you go, I nearly fell down the mountain. Well, don't be silly, you did not. Your body did. But that's stupid, you know? Like Lama Zopa said, oh, the person known as a Laudo Lama is about to die. Well, very objective. You know? I am about to die. I mean, that sounds so silly. Like, don't be ridiculous. Of course I nearly fell off the mountain. So like I said, one of the arguments, you know, is that the very first view, that is the Hindu view, the very first view that Buddha begins to argue with, which is what's called gross selflessness for most of the Buddhist schools. That they argue with the view, Buddha argued with the view that there is a permanent, real, uncaused, unchanging, separate I above, you know, on top of the parts. Just like the Christians would say, you have a body, a mind, and a soul. That's the position Buddha's arguing with. But the other one is, which is arguing with the other Buddhist schools, the view we're discussing here is the view of what they will all say is the real intent of the Buddha, known as the Madhyamika view, the middle way view, but of those, the one that's called the consequentialist middle way view, the Prasangika middle way view, is that they're, you know, this is the view we're discussing here. That view argues with the other view of the other Buddhist schools that somehow the I, that they all accept there's no I separate from the parts, but they would say that there is something among the parts that you can label the I. Some of them say it's a subtle consciousness, some say it's this particular this or particular that. They all say there must be something. Whereas only the Prasangika and Madhyamika say that you can't find anything, even conventionally, among the parts. Because that's the only place to search. You've got to be specific. You've got to look for the I. Well, where do you look for the I? You look for the I among the parts of the I. You don't look in the toilet or on a cup. In other words, you've got to have a basis. And the basis of a cup is its parts. the basis of a person is the parts. So you've got to look among those parts for what we believe is this inherent I.
Parts are invisible. Like
So
the mind.
So what, I know, of course, the
The mind is invisible. How can you look at it?
using your mind. You use your mind to look in the mind, darling. What else? You use intelligence and awareness, supported by alertness and concentration, and they all work together to investigate and think about, because finally the mind is the one that has to come to this conclusion. You search among the thoughts. Use your intelligence. So they say that even conventionally you're not going to find, you know. So one little exercise to prove this one, well, it's what we've been doing already. So one way to look at it is, you know, I'll do a little exercise here. My table, okay, we'll forget this. My table has a book, a cup, and a clock. Do you agree?
Yeah.
You agree, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So, being a skeptic, you should say, okay, prove it. And this is the point. To prove that, it's correct, isn't it, that we have to locate 4 separate individual phenomena. You agree? We have to find a table that is not a book, a cup, and a clock. We have to find a clock that is not a table, a cup, and a book. We have to find a cup that is not a clock, a table, and a book. And we have to find a book that is not a table, a clock, and a cup. Do you accept? It's simple, isn't it? If I say to you, I have $4, I've got to point out to you 4 separate dollars. I mean, in other words, you've got to have to point out individual separate phenomena. Each phenomenon is an individual separate phenomenon. Each thing that exists is one phenomenon. Pretty easy, isn't it? So there is the book. There it is. It's 4 separate phenomena. Easy. Proved it. Conventionally. Well, I have a nose, a hand, and a foot. Do you accept? There's my foot. Look. I'll cut it off. We have to do the same argument. We have to find a foot that is not a hand, a nose, or an eye. We have to find a hand that is not a foot, a nose, and an eye. We have to find a nose that is not a hand, a foot, and an eye. And we can do that. There's the hand, there's the foot, and there's the nose. And now please point out the eye that is not the nose, that is not the hand, that is not the foot, and indeed is not the pee-pee and the caca and the brain and the eyelashes and the anger and the love and the subtle consciousness and the wind energies and everything else. Please point out an I that isn't everything else. So the exercise, one of the meditations they say we need to do is this rigorous, logical analysis, visualizing, imagining, unpacking every tiny part, every milli piece that makes up the I, including all the parts of your mind, your negative parts, your positive ones, your this one, your subtle one, your gross one. Unpack each one, put them down. Now the instinct is we will end up with this little kind of naked, found out little I. It's now kind of sitting there guiltily, now they've been found out, that runs the show. The Buddha says you won't find it. You can't find it. Impossible. Because it doesn't exist. Which doesn't mean you don't exist. That's the tricky bit. But our language reinforces it. Oh, I have that. You know, when we say the word I, it's the central player in our lives, is it not? Everything is the I, how it feels, doesn't want this, don't want that. Everything is seen through the filter of the I's needs. And Buddha says we've been doing, I know it sounds exhausting and insane, for eons. So it's a very deep habit. Kind of hard to break. what's hilarious, because it sounds so abstract, that the belief in this inherent I, the belief in this I, that if it did exist, would be not depending on anything, is the cause of all suffering, all realms, all hells, all gods, all humans, all animals, all any suffering in the universe, period. So it's obviously quite an intense one. Takes time to think about it. Yes, go on.
Yes, I was wondering here, when you die, and as we say you die, and the last thing that leaves the body, not the last thing that leaves the body, but the consciousness is
the very subtle consciousness combined with the very subtle wind energy, the second that leaves your heart chakra, even before it leaves the body, that's already death.
Yeah.
The second it leaves even the heart chakra, it all comes to here at the time of death. The moment it exits the heart chakra and starts to even leave and come through your crown, the second it leaves the heart chakra, it's already becoming the intermediate state being. That's the end of you. You're over.
But I wonder, Robina,
Yeah.
is it that this consciousness goes up into, or is coming together with all consciousness that exists in the universe? I mean,
What are you talking about? Where do you get this dumb idea from?
It's something
I know lots of people like that idea, but try and explain it to me, please.
No.
And that makes nonsense of karma. It makes nonsense of karma. It's like a fantasy idea. If that view is true, then karma has got nothing to do with it. That means there's nothing propelling the mind. The point is, everything you do in your life right now, I forget your name, Barbara. What's your name? Barbara, isn't it? That's right. Whatever Barbara does is propelled by what her mind chooses to do. That is the meaning of karma. So you know yourself, if you practice playing the piano, when you put your hands on the piano, it's kind of spontaneous. You play the piano, right? Well, that means you're propelled by the force of your past habit of playing piano. Would you agree with that? Then everything, that's called karma. Buddha says we're propelled by the force of our past actions. And by the time you stop breathing, this is what Buddha would say, your mind is completely programmed to take a particular kind of experience produced by your habits. So then, this whole idea of where's this consciousness existing? Where is it? What's it doing? What caused it to be there? Okay, what's the cause of it? Everything that exists has to have a cause. So what's the cause of it? What would cause it to go there, this place, with everything else? What's the cause?
I cannot get it together. What was therefore I asked you because I
Excuse me, it's not my idea, it's yours. You're the one who's got the idea. I don't think I think it's a dumb idea. I don't think it's true. I'm using Buddha's view here. You're the one who said it. So if you said it, you must have an understanding of how it works. But that's our problem when it comes to religion. We don't think we have to have a reason. We think we can just say anything we like. It's sort of like we think, I can say 1 and 1 is 74. Well, why isn't it 74? You've got to have logic. You've got to have an explanation. If you're going to present something, you've got to have an explanation. You can't just present it and then say, well, I don't know. Then don't present it. You can't do that. It's irresponsible. It's kind of just meaningless. Are you seeing my point?
I see your point.
Well, if you want that to be a view, you better start coming up with some interpretations, do some analysis, investigate it, and if you think there's some truth in it, please come up with your proposition.
I will go out.
Otherwise it's meaningless. But that's what people think about spiritual. I'm allowed to believe what I like, we'll say. Any old idea we can come up with in our mind, I'll believe that. That's how we think about spiritual. Well, it's irresponsible. Do you see my point?
I see your point. I hope I will go and look deeper.
You should look deeper and come up with a philosophy.
Yeah.
Present your thesis, please. All I'm doing is presenting Buddha's thesis. You see my point?
Isn't it true that not everybody is reborn directly? That there's.
What do you mean by directly?
I mean, more or less.
What do you mean directly?
So
do you mean by
this
that word?
intermediate state.
No, immediate's different. No one, you go to an intermediate state
Yes, yes.
first.
But this takes, well, it's
Up to 49 days, they say.
yes, and it's not for everybody the same.
Huh?
It's not for everybody the same length.
No,
Some
it could be,
earlier
if you, let's say, listen, if you're going to get born as an ant,
Mm.
I would suggest you won't have to hang around waiting in the intermediate state for mummy and daddy ants to come together. There'll be plenty of opportunities. There'll be no waiting around, baby. But maybe to be born a human, you might have to wait a bit. So the subtlest meaning of dependent arising, the subtlest conclusion to come to, the actual meaning of emptiness, that is the actual intent of the Buddha, is that on the basis of your analysis of looking for the I among the parts, and you discover the absence of the I among those parts, the emptiness, that's then you get to see the truth that the I conventionally is merely labelled. This is the subtlest meaning of dependent arising. That the I is merely labelled I by the mind. And that everything exists like that. This is the subtlest one, the hardest one to conquer. Merely labelled, they say. So it's on the basis of the analysis of the parts, looking for the independent I, looking for the I that's independent of everything. When you found the absence of it, which is seeing emptiness, it's then you will discover, they say, subtle dependent arising, that I is merely labelled. I is just a word that's imputed by the mind upon the parts. So what happens here is, we go, there is no I from its own side among the parts. There are the parts, that's what you're searching, but there's no I among the parts. And we'll go, oh, well thank God, at least there are the parts. Phew, I've got a knee and a nose. No. Because then you start searching for the knee among its parts. And you're going to find among the parts of the knee, you will not find any knee. There are the parts that is the basis of the label knee. So then we'll go, oh, thank God there are the parts, there are the bones and the this and that. No. Because now you start searching bones. Well, bones is merely the name imputed by the mind on its parts. Oh, then I've got the gluck, whatever it is. No. Well, in other words, whatever, it's like this smoke and mirrors. This is like an illusion. You name an object, self, ear, knee, atom, paper, letter, clock, thread, paint. You name the object, and remember the world is made up of billions of individual conventional phenomena. You name the object, and then you search among the parts of that object for the paint, the handle, the clock, the knee, the eye, the nose, and you'll have the same discussion every time. You will not find anything among the parts that is the knee, the paint, the clock, the atom, the quark, whatever the tiniest thing of the universe is. As soon as you say there is a quark, or a quark, whatever they call it, I don't know what the smallest piece of atom they found these days, I don't know. As soon as you start searching among its parts, you will not find a quark, because it's merely a label imputed by the mind upon its parts, and you'll never end that process. So it's like smoke and mirrors. There is an I that does function, that does fulfill the function. There is a cup that does hold my tea. Look, I'm drinking from it. But there is no cup from its own side. This is the two part, this is the two we have to put together, you know, these two truths that seem contradictory.
But this way of investigation can also go in the other direction.
Which one?
So if we search the parts inside the parts, so we go smaller and smaller and smaller, we can also go, okay, I, or this conventional I, is just a part.
Can someone push my bed back to the wall? I'm sliding forward and I'll fall over again. Hang on, Nicholas. Get me comfortable first. Can you push me forward?
Forward or back?
Back to the wall. That's it.
On the other
And this
side.
one too, yeah.
Please help.
Nicholas. Thank you. Now go on, Nicholas. What's this other direction
So
you're going?
we can go, this analysis we can make also in the other direction. So we have planets, solar system, galaxies.
What does that prove?
No,
I'm asking you, what does that prove?
well, that it's infinitive in both ways.
But what's it prove? What are you proving here? You're trying to prove where the phenomenon is among its parts. So how does that prove anything?
Well, it doesn't prove
It
that.
doesn't prove that. Well, that's all. You're just getting all fancy there. So don't wander off into some la la land. It's not relevant to this discussion. Keep on track. Okay. Are we communicating, people?
Yes.
Yeah, very well.
Yeah, but sometimes it seems that to understand these things you have to be a genius.
We do have to be a genius. And the way we become a genius, to get super intelligence, is by purifying, lessening attachment, lessening anger, lessening depression, lessening jealousy, because they are the things that prevent us from having this wisdom, from being a genius. Yes. Delusions that believe in this sloppy, yucky, revolting, grasping, slimy junk in our minds. So we get rid of those. What you do is you sharpen your mind, you clarify your mind, and then we are able then to see this emptiness. Because the delusions are full of drama, you know. Rage and depression and angry and jealous and depressed and poor me and blah. When you have wisdom and clarity or genius, yes, crystal clear, steady as a rock, blissfully funny, joyful, lovely person to be around, happy, wise, nothing can deter you, no fear. So the mind is brilliantly genius. You see, this is very interesting. That's how they talk about these reincarnated lamas, you know. And what's fascinating these days, you can see among many, many, many Western children, are reborn lamas. Some have been already, you know, some have been recognized. But, you know, horribly, in the West, many of them are called autistic. It's very fascinating. Because they're showing this, they don't behave. I mean, there's one child I know many actually, who effectively has been recognized by a lama. He said, of course, it's how yogis behave. This kid is a classic example of autistic. You know, not an extreme autistic with really serious emotional disconnect. But usually they have the character of super intelligent, super genius, super sharp, and powerful energy. Huge uncontrolled energy, behavior, you know, but intense intelligence, intense mental energy. This particular kid. The West calls him autistic. He's got outrageous behavior because he hasn't got much attachment to what people think of him. So at school, he's sort of like, he's like a king. You know, he tells the teacher off, "You're not listening to me." And it's probably true, you know. But it's like behavior like you can't imagine. Genius, since he's like 1 or 2 on the computer, speaking Spanish, doing everything backwards, going on to YouTube and learning Chinese this, and he does his Lego things and builds these elaborate, sophisticated design little houses with. In other words, one of the key points that I see more and more, the point I'm getting at here with this genius business, as you lessen delusions, so you develop wisdom. And wisdom is a very real state of mind, not cosmic, but it's a sharp, clear mind that's very good at detail. What I've seen more and more over the years, studying this stuff and trying to practice it myself, when I worked, for example, we had our prison project, and I had to do all the money and I was raising the money, I used to love doing the accounts. I love numbers, you know, and I realised, it's my own thinking, that the same part of my mind that has to have the clarity of numbers or science is exactly the same part that you need to do this dependent arising discussion we're having here. It's all about detail, precision, clarity. Delusions are very big sweeping statements of confusion and drama and junk, you know. But wisdom has got incredible quality of unbelievable, brilliant clarity. And I see in some of the minds of these kids, this one in particular, brilliant mind. He needs the people around him, so therefore he looks like he's emotionally backward, you know. Doesn't mind what people think of him. Super his own little boss. Seemingly very arrogant, hard to control, but extraordinary kind of, you know, like Lama Zopa gave him some practice to do. He had to memorise the Heart Sutra. So he memorised the Heart Sutra. Now he's memorising something else. And he asked me all these intelligent questions about the Heart Sutra, you know. I mean, he was 4 when he was doing this. Super intelligent. But looks like, because the Western view of what's normal is 2 children all needy to each other, then getting jealous and then punching and then kissing again and making up. That's considered normal. Well, that's called attachment, jealous, angry, attached to reputation, but that's what we call normal. I was kind of depressing. So if you don't care much what people think of you, you're called disconnected. Do you understand? I mean, it's a bit depressing. I know many children. There's another kid in Israel. She's not been recognised, but my own observation, not that I know much, but she's very special, very quiet. There's another girl too in Scotland who's been formally recognised as the reincarnation of one amazing great yogi. And since she was born, she saw photos. She said, that's me. She was crystal clear who she was, no doubt. And the lamas have recognised her, but she's got peaceful energy. And there's another little girl too. Maybe it's the girls, I don't know. It's the boys are wild, I don't know. But there's several little girls now. And her behaviour is impeccable. She's humble, she's quiet, but also she looks disconnected. She doesn't have the same needs that people with delusions have. And I remember even hearing in the New York Times about autistic kids, and there's some Swedish company that has started a company, like a tech company, and he hires autistic kids, meaning this genius, technical, brilliant little mind, you know? It's very interesting. So please keep your children away from the psychiatrists, okay? Oh, it's really scary. Because it's a very different way of seeing what's valid and what's not, what's good and what's bad, you know? It's very interesting. God. This little girl in Scotland, she's incredible. Way ahead, she's like 7 years ahead in her classes, but she just appears normal, you know, but she doesn't behave badly. She's got a very subdued nature, but extraordinary power of speech. They talk about the power of speech of the lamas. When your speech is very powerful, it influences people. She's got this power. When she talks, which is not much, you just have to listen. She's got some real influence with her. Very charismatic. Her voice is very meaning, because she's got some wisdom, you know. It's very fascinating seeing these kids and understanding the quality, like she said, genius, is true. You know, we think of wisdom when it comes to spiritual or something kind of cosmic. It's rubbish. It means a super sharp mind that can deal with the details. And that's the discussion we're having here. You need a clear, sharp mind to argue, using logic to argue with delusions, vomit, disgusting, slimy, garbage, junk ideas, you know, that cling so strongly to what we think is true. It's very scary to give it up. Wisdom is clear, sharp, bright. You know. So when you go to single point of concentration, which means you've accessed a really subtle level of your own mind, way more subtle than we could ever conceive of developing in our culture, way beyond gross conceptuality, but super, like a laser beam level of mind, that's not just sitting there spacing out in concentration, but you can utilise that to do this incredibly sophisticated, subtle analysis that argues with the delusions. That's the level of mind that realises emptiness. So it's not how we tend to think sometimes. So yes, we need to be genius. It's true. And the way to become a genius is get rid of attachment, anger, pride, jealousy, and the garbage stuff, all the emotional junk, you know. But if you only think of the wisdom side, then you'd be a bit like autistic. You've got to have the compassion side there too. So the person who's really got the wisdom, and I can see this with a little kid, he looks like he's fierce and fights with people, but he's got enormous empathy with other people, extraordinary insight into people's minds, very compassionate, you know. So the compassion wing has to be there too. Nicholas, what do you want?
What does it mean to accept one as a lama, for the lama and for the student?
Okay, you've got to ask the question first, what's a lama? What do you understand? What's a lama, Nicholas?
It's a teacher which pushes you in the direction.
No, darling, it's a spiritual teacher. The equivalent word in Sanskrit is guru. I don't know Sanskrit, but I've heard it translates as heavy with qualities. The term in Tibetan I like very much. Dalai Lama's name, Tenzin, knowledge holder. So if you think of music or maths or whatever, if you want to learn it, you need a knowledge holder. You need a person who's internalized that information. Just how I'm saying, whatever it is, you need a person who really knows how to do it, not just intellectual. A real tennis player, a real musician. And you can see how amazing that is to get that person, because that's the one you need to show you how you become your tennis player, your musician, your Buddha. So, okay. In the same way, if we think of the Buddha, you know, it's kind of interesting. If we think of the Buddha, we think of that nice fellow back 2,500 years ago with a lump on his head, looking holy, isn't it? There's the Buddha. We see a statue. Oh, there's the Buddha, you know. But if you think about it, if you were back there at that time, you would just see one of the countless sadhus wearing their yellow robes walking around India begging. You're not going to tell one from another, believe me. We're going, oh, there's Buddha. Forget it, you know. You're just going to see this bloke. So in that sense, Mr. Shakyamuni Buddha was our first guru. He's our teacher. He's called a teacher. He was that because the Buddha doesn't need a body. The Buddha is the pure mind, you know. So our compassion is manifesting in this body. So that's what a teacher is the embodiment for you of the Buddha's qualities. But given that we can't tell one person from another, you've got to use your head and check up and see if you have, then once you've checked on the person, checked on their qualities, checked on their credentials, checked on their students, listened to them, thought about them, checked on their peers, really have some confidence intellectually that that person is valid, then you commit to them as your teacher and you request, please lead me to enlightenment. And that's a very powerful commitment to make to somebody. And that person then for you becomes for you, and certainly in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition and the Vajrayana, all the practices are crucially those that enable you to cultivate, develop and cultivate the view that my Lama is the Buddha. And the more you're capable of doing this, the more quickly you'll achieve those results. This is what they're saying. So clearly we need one of them. We need knowledge holders to show us how, you know. I mean, I think if we look at our lives, I think there's nothing we've learned that we haven't learned from a person. Even if we read books, people write books. So we need a knowledge holder. We need a valid teacher, you know. It's really obvious. And also I think just because on a human level, we all got human hearts. And we know ourselves, even one teacher from school we might never forget, one teacher at university, one teacher of music. We remember the ones who touched our hearts, you know, and we know we need the intellect, we need the clarity, we need the instructions, but we also need to open the heart. And that's really a major part of it, I think. And we're human, you know, so we just, intellect only, forget it. That would be autistic. But with the human heart, so like, I see the effect that the Dalai Lama has on people on this earth. It's very interesting to observe it, you know. Millions of people seem to like him, isn't it? Many of them would not say, oh, he's my Lama, but they really think about him and they use him as their mentor in their mind. Well, that's what a guru is. It's a person in front of you who inspires you, who helps you see that it's possible for you to be like it, you know? And then, of course, when you have a more formal relationship, that's when it becomes more powerful. So we really need a Lama. It's very obvious, that person, don't we? So what was your question about a Lama? Did that answer it?
Yes, it answers. And can I just ask like this, or do there have to be some special? I mean, when I did all my analysis, and I'm very sure that this is really
You request. Okay. It's the best one. Well, I know actually when I met my Lamas, Lama Yeshe, he was the main Lama who started the FPMT, and he's the Lama of Lama Zopa. Lama Yeshe passed away more than 30 years ago. And now his reincarnation is this young Spanish boy, you know, he's about 28 or something now, I think. Maybe he's 30 by now. Yeah, Lama passed away, whatever it was, 31 years. Well, Lama Yeshe was the first Lama I met when I was about 31 in Queensland in Australia. And I wasn't looking for a Lama, I was a radical feminist, you know, I'd been in politics and everything and really looking, but I was looking for something, and I bumped into these Lamas and went to this course. And strong connection I could see with Lama. I liked him, you know, I liked him very much. And then eventually I did a couple of months teachings and retreats, and then went back home to Melbourne, continuing to just do my life. And then halfway through, it kind of, the feeling, the strong idea in my mind came that Lama Yeshe was my guru, you know. So I remember I was feeling it was in the 70s, I whispered to my sister Polly, I said, Polly, I've got a Lama, but don't tell a guru, but don't tell anybody. I felt so embarrassed about having a guru. I thought a guru was a revolting idea, you know, being an old radical feminist. Anyway, so went back to Chenrezig Institute the following year, and I had a meeting with Lama, and I didn't know you're supposed to ask, and I'm very arrogant, so I informed him that he was my Lama. I said, yes, I know you. Something like that. So then, anyway, it's nice to ask. Of course, in Tibet, because it's very formal, you'd prostrate 3 times, you'd make an offering, and you'd please request, you know. And then it depends on the Lama. I mean, some of my friends have gone to Lama Yeshe and say, please be my Lama. He says, no, I'm not your Lama, go to that Lama. So it depends, you know. So, anyway. Lama, yeah. So you're impressed. But the point is this one, I'm going to talk about this one. The thing that's so important, because we're also addicted again, like I'm saying, to the view of religion as belief, holy in the sky, and somehow we're putting the responsibility on that person. They're the one who judges, rewards, and that's the very strong view of ego. We want that kind of thing. So we're intellectually lazy, you know. So the one of a guru, if you're going to choose a Lama, choose a guru, you've got to, you know, I like to put it this way, we are the boss, not him. You know, I always use the example. It seems so simple, but for me it's a really good analogy. Of when I first learned to make a cake. I always use this example. I was a hippie, and I was living in London, and I remember the thought, the first time in my life, I was 26, that the thought to make a cake arose in my mind. And this is a really important point, because we all know, got a lovely saying in English, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Yeah? Because you know how we are forced to go to school, and we're forced to go to church, and we're forced to believe this, and we're forced to believe that. We're sort of shoved down our throat. That's why we rebel, you know. But the Buddhist one is, you can't force anybody. You can't bring a water. You can't force it. The person's got to be ready. You've got to know you want it. So I use the example of a cake. My mother, I was 26, I was in London, and I wanted to make a cake. And I wanted to make a carrot cake. I'm a hippie, right? So it was the first time in my life, really and truly, I remember the moment. And then I thought, well, I'm going to go home to Melbourne anyway, so I'll ask my mum. Now, believe me, I wasn't kind to my mother. I decided I'd ask my mother because I'd done my due diligence. I'd tasted my mother's cakes. I'd tasted her students' cakes, my sisters. Her peers said she was a good cake maker. And you kind of get my point. I'd done my research. So in other words, even though I did not have any experience of cake making, and this is exactly what all the Buddha's teachings say, you can't have experience, you don't know, because, you know, if my mother said put 47 eggs in, I wouldn't know she was right or wrong, I had no experience. So all you can rely upon is your intelligence. And they call that inferential knowledge, inferential certainty. And that's what we do, we check up on doctors, you check what your friends say, what the people say, you look up on the internet how many ups instead of downs they've got. We do this all the time. Then you are confident that person is valid. That's the best we can do. So I was confident intellectually that my mother was a valid knowledge holder, cake maker. So then and this is what's interesting. I remember the day, I remember the cake. It wasn't a carrot cake, it was an apple and walnut cake. I remember the kitchen, the moment, because it went in my mind for the first time. As Robina Courtin said, you know, the Four Noble Truths become real for you when you hear them from the mouth of a person. And that's the benefit of a teacher. You can read a book, but it's just not the same, you know. So I'll never forget. I didn't think of it then, but I'm using this as an analogy now, this perfect example. So when my mother, I finally was ready, I wanted it. Can you imagine how happy my mum was? I was 26. She's known how to make cakes since I was born, but she didn't force me. She was sitting there waiting for Bobsy, you know, to ask her. So finally I asked her. She must be so happy. She was also my singing guru, actually. She taught me music. She was a classical singer. She taught me singing. Anyway, I remember the day in the kitchen, and she told, so there I was, please mum, show me how to make a cake. I was ready. She showed me, and I remember it. And I haven't made a cake for more than 20 years. I bet I would make a good cake. Because she was valid, she knew how to make cakes, I was ready, I wanted it, all the conditions came together. Now that's the experience. You know how in Buddhism they talk about transmission from the guru? That's a transmission, people. Don't make it fantasy. Can you hear my point? My mother passed on her knowledge from her mind to my mind. But I had to be ready. My mind was open. And that's what devotion is. Devotion is an open heart, based on intelligence. I didn't resist my mother. I wasn't being aggressive. I wasn't being arrogant. I listened to my mum and I did what she said. So I got the knowledge. She passed it on to me. That's a transmission. That's like an initiation. I'm really not joking now. But we mystify these words, you know. That's why I remember it. It was the first time cakes became real for me. Well, that's why you need a teacher. It's just obvious, you know. So you better be confident. Because the teacher one, the spiritual teacher, I mean, this is uncharted territory. We have not been enlightened before. Excuse me, you better check up what you think enlightenment is. That's the enlightenment you want, and on their reputation, and on who they are, and on their students, and on their teachings, and then you've got to have this absolute certainty that you want to give your heart to this person. Because that's what you're doing, you've got to entrust them. So you better check up if they're worthy of your heart. And I'm really serious when I say it this way. Because so many people go, you know, because we mystify religion, go to some teacher, oh wow, he's so charismatic, must be a Buddha. You basically just fall in love with him. And then your attachment gets disappointed, then you sue him. I mean, so many people, I've seen it, you know, because we're so emotional and childish. So you've got to be a real grown-up. Because the fact is, the Lama's job is to show you your mind, and that is not comfortable. We don't want to see our minds. We'll do everything not to see our minds. And our Lama is the one we're trusting to show us our delusions. That's their job. And that's really intense. Are you hearing me?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I remember when I had my Kung Fu teacher. This is a really good example too. I used, in my own political process, you know, starting with being Robina, a Catholic, and then a hippie, I was going through this internal growth process. And I know that at some point, especially when I was very political, and I started to hear about, you know, teachers, we really became very independent. Who needs a teacher? I'm going to teach myself. I need to do it. And that's a really important point to get to. I need to do it myself. So then I sort of threw the baby out with the bathwater and said, I don't need teachers, I'll do it. So I did karate. One time when I was still a feminist, I was in New York, and I chose this karate school because it was just for women. That's what I wanted. Well, I studied for more than a year there, okay? And then I went back to Melbourne, and by this point, because I've been through my political days, I really realised I couldn't keep hating half the human race, you know, it just wasn't working. So I started to change my mind a bit. And then I chose this karate school, which was the same style as in New York, and it happened to be taught by a man. That was a big leap for me, but I decided it was fine. And I checked up, and he looked like he was good. Now, it was interesting. I went my first class, and because it was the same style, I told him I was a blue belt or something. He put me in the blue belts. He watched me. Next class, he said, I'm sorry, Robina, best you go back to the white belts. Well, I was really insulted. Do you understand? I was insulted. Excuse me, I'm a blue belt. But what I realized, I was nearly going to leave, and then I thought about it, and this was a very powerful moment for me in my life. It was the first time I realized you need a proper teacher. Because I realized I'd chosen the wrong teacher before. And I'd learned karate wrong for 1 year. Because I chose her for the wrong reason. She wasn't valid. She wasn't good. So he could see this, and I did have faith in him. I did have confidence in him. So I accepted it. And that's when I really realized you need a teacher. For anything. Excuse me, for anything, you know. But I mean, everybody puts themselves as an expert these days. And we just believe anybody. And then we blame them when they don't teach us properly. But we are the boss. A person is allowed to say they're a yoga teacher. They're allowed to say they're a good yoga teacher. But we have to be confident that they're valid. And that's what we don't do, because we love to give ourselves over to somebody because it's attachment. And then we blame them. And this is where it's really monstrous, you know. So we've got to be very careful in choosing spiritual teachers, I tell you. We jump into it far too easily. Because it's the most intense relationship you'll ever have. And I don't mean to make it sound romantic. So even my Kung Fu teacher, okay, later, that's right, sorry. So 20 years later, after I'd been a nun for quite a while, I was living in London, I decided I want martial arts again. I was like 40 this time, 40 something, and I found this martial arts school, another one, and it was a Kung Fu this time, a different style. It was a Chinese guy. Anyway, I checked on him, and he was there. I watched his class, kids, and he was amazing, you know, so I studied with him for about 2 years. What I'm getting at is, I was always a fanatic, right? I just didn't go once a week, I went 6 days a week. Whatever I did, I'd do it extreme, you know. So I was studying 6 days a week with this guy. It was very funny because I was like 42 and I was a Buddhist nun, but nobody knew I was a Buddhist nun because I had hair and I wore normal clothes. And me and a 14-year-old Chinese boy and this 19-year-old other boy, we were the fanatics. They sort of sort of knew I was older, but I wasn't quite sure. I didn't know what the Buddha's done. So we were three of the fanatics. We'd go to all the classes and we'd go to McDonald's afterwards and eat 4 pounds of chips. Because you need your carbohydrates. We'd go to the Chinese movies in Chinatown in London. I was like an infant, I tell you, it was hilarious. Anyway, whatever, I used to love cooked food. But he was an amazing teacher and I was really committed. Now the point is this, he was a really tough teacher. He would scream at me. Well, I didn't want to sue him. I was honoured he screamed at me. Because he knew I wanted his kung fu. I mean, I did go 6 days a week. You know, it's hardly surprising. You're committed, then your teacher will push you to the limit. We want that, you know? So the same with my spiritual teachers. I'm serious. I'm trying to be a good practitioner. I'm not saying I've got that far, but I am committed. I am sincere. So my lamas can see that. Well, they push you to the limit. That means they won't tolerate your delusions. I mean, they're really intense, you know? One time I had to go ask Lama Zopa a question in the centre in France, and the attendant went to see Lama Zopa in the room, and I could see him there. And she said, Robina's outside of me, He ignored. 4 times. He ignored. So she came back, straightened his shoulder, go back to my room. So, you know, normally if you've got all attachment, well, who does he think he is? And how dare my Lama, you know, blah, 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 upset. But clearly it wasn't valid for me to ask a question, so he ignored me. One time I asked him a question, he said, what are you asking me for? And changed the subject. I mean, things like this, normal human behaviour would be considered rude, right? That's what you need to hear. Because they're way ahead, they're going to see you coming. Because, you know, if you can imagine a person with no delusions, no attachment, no neurosis, no ego, no depression, no jealousy, just brilliant, clear, genius mind, as well as infinite compassion, not to mention clairvoyance, excuse me, that's a good person to know. They're going to really guide you nicely according to what you need at your pace. So I'm so happy to have spiritual teachers. You know, we need, because delusions are really manipulative. Ego, my very first job, in other words, with lamas, my very first job. I mean, I'm very arrogant, right? And very, you know, I like to do things. And I've got, you know, just rush ahead, I'll do things. Not only to be told to do it, I will do it. I like doing things. So when I first met the Dharma and became a nun, I didn't want to meditate. It was a pretty boring idea, you know. I had no interest in sitting down with my eyes closed. It was a stupid idea, you know. But I did want to look at my mind. That I understood. So anyway, and I'd always done publishing all my life. It's been my expertise, editing and graphics and stuff. So I fell into the job immediately, almost, of our publishing company, Wisdom Publications. So I just assumed I was going to run it. You know, this is my expertise. I just assumed Lama would appoint me to be the director. It was just like a no-brainer as far as I was concerned. And then I get a note after one retreat I did, and Lama was moving us to England, and Lama said, fantastic, Robina can be the secretary. Well, I nearly fainted. I could not believe Lama. I said to myself, I'll never forget, I said to myself, poor Lama, he doesn't understand. And then he appointed a person to be the boss who had no knowledge whatsoever of publishing. None whatsoever. In fact, he was this hippie. This kind of, we thought he was he wasn't kind of a yogi, but no knowledge, no understanding about any business, but he was a director. I nearly went mad for 2 years, and I'm really not joking. Some part of me knew it was right, but I couldn't get it, because for me, I was good at publishing. Of course, I should be the boss. This guy wasn't. Then obviously he can't be the boss. That's the normal logic in the world, isn't it? Well, it's taken me all these years to realise that when you're dealing, you know, these lamas are dealing with your mind. I've seen it countless times all over the world in all these centres. That they give you the job that you have to learn, not the one you're good at. Because guess why? You know. So for me, I nearly went mad. But that was my Dharma practice: controlling my pride, controlling my ego. Well, still trying. But I wouldn't have looked like I was practicing. I'd scream and yell and throw things in the sky. I was so mad at it, you know. But I struggled every single night. I'd close my office door. I'd do my prostrations, crying, wanting this garbage to go away of my crazy mind, you know, fighting with my own delusions. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. And that's a wise teacher. He could have let me run it. I would have done a brilliant job, but I wouldn't have worked on my mind. That's a fact. And I've seen this countless times over the years. I remember he said to one director, you think you've got this job because you're good at it? No. You got this job because you created the cause to do it. Because that's the job you're supposed to do. So, you know, I got the job to be secretary all the time. To help. Finally, you know. Do you understand? So not to be the boss. Because that's what I had to learn. I had to control anger and pride. You know, still trying. Are you with me, people?
Yeah.
So it's not, you know, spiritual teachers, not some give you an instruction, be all holy, forget it, you know. They show you your mind. They show you your mind, which means your delusions, which means you confront your delusions, which means they put you to work with people you can't stand. It's exhausting. That's spiritual practice. So left on our own resources, we couldn't do that. You know? No way. So anyway, my own experience, that was just blah, blah, blah. Any questions about teachers? Because I think sometimes things come up and we get a bit confused about it. Anybody have any questions about these things? Things that have popped up in your mind over the years, or some confusion about who is a teacher and who's about, I mean, I don't know, just anything, please. It's an important topic.
Can you have a teacher even if you haven't met them in person? Like,
Say it again.
Could you have a teacher even if you haven't met them in person?
I understand.
If you look,
I've met lots of people who say feel very devoted to Lama Yeshe, and he's dead. Lots of people to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Many people see him as their root guru, the term they use in Tibetan, your main Lama, and they've never had a personal meeting. That's very, of course, it's completely common. You see them, but you have teachings, but people very much feel that. And this is where, once you've cultivated that view, that relationship, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition especially, you develop that in your practices, in the way you do the visualizations. You practice seeing the Buddha as the guru, and it develops you. In other words, the work is inside our own mind. It's not as if you sit at their feet and have to have a relationship with them, like we have a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. It's done in your own mind, with your way of seeing that person. That's how you get that's how you progress in that relationship. Do you understand? Yeah. Any questions? Huh? Don't know. About anything? We should talk about bodhicitta a bit now, a bit about bodhicitta, isn't it? We haven't talked much about bodhicitta, the compassion wing that has to be combined with the perfection of wisdom. Well, there are two different approaches, you know. On the wisdom wing, which is the basis, which is your preparation actually to then move into the bodhisattva path, which is the point, is absolutely crucial. You can't have compassion without wisdom. So the wisdom wing is like a preparation. You control your body and speech, you live in vows, you purify your mind, you go to high school, you learn to meditate, you learn to go to the depth, to get to the root of the problem, which is the delusions. You develop incredible renunciation, you become this marvelous, clear, content, wise, controlled person. You continue working on the compassion wing. And so the wisdom wing is all about yourself in a way. You are the main point, you are backing off, you are controlling your body and your speech and your mind. And you're the main beneficiary of all of this. Indirectly, sentient beings benefit because you become a nicer person, but it's all about putting yourself together, and it's absolutely fundamental. We often tend to think, oh, compassion is the main point, you know. We don't pay nearly enough attention to seeing our own suffering, keep looking at our own garbage, becoming disgusted at our own delusions, and wanting to get the hell out of suffering. That's for our own benefit. You've got to want that. You've got to know your own self deeply and well, and develop this renunciation of the junk, but which brings confidence and clarity within yourself and real confidence in your own potential. It's amazing and necessary. Then you're qualified to continue working on your mind. That never stops. But now the reference point is others. All the techniques here. So one way they talk, in the wisdom wing you could say the main problem is attachment. This neurotic craving to get what the fantasy I wants. So on the basis of ego grasping, you have this craving to get what it wants, and you're trying to subdue that, plus the attachment and the anger, plus the anger and all the other rubbish. So here, the same work, you continue working on your mind, but the reference point for this now is sentient beings, and the way it's framed is the main problem here is now called self-cherishing, or as we'd simply say, selfishness, putting self first. So attachment is one discussion. That's the main one. If you look at Buddhist psychology, that's the name of the delusion. If you look at the list of delusions in Buddhist psychology, you won't find one in the list called selfishness, but it's the reference point, it's the framework for understanding the opposite, which is learning to cherish others, especially this amazing whole practice that's been perfected in Tibet, which came from Shantideva, which is the one of exchanging self for others. Exchanging self for others, this really radical way of rooting out ego. So you could say on the basis of ego grasping, there's attachment to get what I want. And then on the basis of ego grasping, here in the compassion wing, we put self first. So we're trying to reverse that. This is the way they describe the process, you know. And so there's different little packages of techniques that one cultivates that culminate in bodhicitta. And there's one, we'll go through some of the points of it, there's a combination of two main techniques. And this one is called the 6 causes and 1 effect, and the other is called exchanging self for others, which is from this whole tradition, this genre of practices. All the Tibetan great holy beings have used this one, which is the one I said before, has come from Shantideva through to Atisha, who got it from his guru Salimpa in Indonesia, who then brought it all to Tibet, which is still the main way that these great lamas practice. This one of exchanging self for others in the genre of practices known as Lojong, literally meaning mind training. It's a whole series of types of practices, you know, using this more radical approach of cultivating bodhicitta called exchanging self for others. The essence, the essential practice of which is this one called Tonglen, giving and taking. So one way of combining these two systems, it turns out into being 11 little techniques. The final one of which is bodhicitta. But so let's start with the first one, which itself is already an incredible realization. And this is called equanimity. So equanimity is a typical English word, but here, like so many of these words, it's got a really precise definition. And so what equanimity is, once you've achieved it, once you've accomplished it, the one has to practice it, it's the heartfelt recognition that enemy, friend and stranger are exactly the same as each other from one point of view. Their wish to be happy and their wish not to suffer. So we're taking these particular concepts and trying to get an experience of this. So the method to do this is you visualize, you imagine an enemy, a friend and a stranger. And then you do this different kind of ways of analysing to get to prove to ourselves the truth of this, that they are exactly the same as each other from this one point of view. Now, right now, we know very well, if we think of our beloved, who is the object of attachment, and then we think of our enemy, even though we don't use that phrase, just it means the person you have aversion for, who you don't like. We've all got lots of them. And so you have your friend, your enemy, and then your stranger. So these are the 3 categories of sentient beings in the universe. There's no 4th category. And this is another way of framing Buddhist psychology. The 3 main delusions: attachment, aversion, and ignorance. And the main function here of ignorance is the one of indifference, uncaring. So if you look at it, attachment is what you have for the person whom you call your friend. They appear divine to you, you go towards them. And why do they appear delicious? And why indeed do you also have love for them? We do have love for them. Love is a virtue. Love is may you be happy. That's the definition of love in Buddhism. May you be happy. A delight in someone's happiness. We do have love, but only for that category, for our friends. So what is a friend? An object of attachment. What is an object of attachment? Why do we think they're lovely? Why do they appear nice to us? Guess what? Because they do what my attachment wants. That's why. It's very clear. By definition, a beloved is a person who does what your attachment wants. By definition, an enemy is a person who doesn't do what your attachment wants. And guess what an enemy is? A stranger is a person who neither harmed nor helped us. So how do we feel about them? Couldn't care less. And this is the universe, is it not? And that's 99.999%, isn't it? This is how the world is. It's sort of embarrassing if you think about it. This is join samsara. This is samsara, what it says. So, I'll do my little show and tell here. So one time, I was reading my New York Times. Here's my New York Times. I'm a newspaper magazine freak. I read about 20 magazines and newspapers. Just so I have an iPad. Anyway, you know about human beings. It's unbelievable. I can't get enough, So here's my New York Times, okay? oh, never mind. But you know how the stories are. You've got a little heading and a brief summary, and then you click and you press on the story. Well, I was reading it one day, and over here on the right, I noticed out of the corner of my eye a story that said, a heading that said, 350 people die in ferry accident in Tasmania. Now, Tasmania is my ferry, a boat, you know?
A boat, yes.
350 people die in ferry accident in Tasmania. Well, Tasmania is my people. It's an Australian state, right? So I go, oh, and then I go, oh, Tanzania. Then I caught myself, of course, and start to read it, trying to have compassion. Because Tanzania is strangers for me, isn't it? I don't even know where Tanzania is, in Africa somewhere. It's very instinctive, isn't it? Tasmania, wow, immediately excited. You know, oh my God. And then I realised it was Tanzania. Oh, okay. Friends, enemies, strangers is completely instinctive within us. Having ego grasping, we naturally have attachment. Having attachment, we naturally have enemies. And having attachment, we naturally have strangers. And the universe is divided into these three. There is no fourth category. So, of course, there are a few friends, a few enemies, and 99.99% are strangers. Now, we know this, right? Okay, so this is the basis of this analysis. What we're trying to do, my way of putting it, is get ourselves out of the equation, step back, and try, you know, right now, enemy, friend, and stranger are real. This is one argument to see how we see them as self-existent. There's a real friend, definitely from their side, and there's a real enemy and a real stranger. Meaning, when we see the enemy, let's say the person, the politician I can't stand, you know, we don't go, and this is the type of analysis you do. You just stop when I'm talking now. This is what you have to do to see how your view is not accurate. So if you see a politician you don't like, it's because he doesn't have views like yours, isn't it? That's why. That's why. He doesn't have views like yours. So therefore, he's ugly. And we don't think, well, you know, when I look at George Bush, especially George Bush, people used to love hating George Bush, didn't they? You know, if I look at George Bush, we don't go, well, you know, he appears rather ugly to me, but I'm sure that's just my projection. We don't say that. We will go, George Bush is this, he is that, he is this. I mean, most cartoonists portrayed him as a monkey. It shows how people saw him. I remember Dalai Lama saying, he's actually a very nice man. Don't like his politics much. That's a really nice way to put it, you know. So, you know, it's sort of obvious what I'm saying. An enemy is a person who doesn't do what you like, especially if they're a personal enemy, like if Nicholas left me for a younger version. Then he's the real, absolutely, isn't it? I mean, 1 minute he's a friend, next minute he's an enemy. But before that, he was a stranger. So this one of the examples I like to use is this one. Let's say Nicholas, before I met him, he's a stranger. He was the bloke down at number 7, you know? Yeah. Oh, yeah, Nicholas down the road. Yeah, really? Okay. You know, say he got sick. I've heard he got sick. Oh, did he really? The poor fellow. And you change the subject. You couldn't care less. He's a stranger. Isn't it? But now let's say I fall in love with Nicholas. And now he's over in the friend category. And he gets sick. I've got such compassion for him. Thinking of him day and night and worry he's going to die on me and adore him and love him. And looks like so noble because I don't even go to sleep because I'm looking after Nicholas all night. Excuse me, he was just... Can you hear my point here? And now he leaves me for someone else and he gets sick again. I hope he dies. I'm glad he's sick. I hope he suffers. I mean, you know what I'm saying, isn't it? It's sort of obvious. And we take this for granted. So the point is this. When Nicholas was the stranger, and when Nicholas was the friend, and when Nicholas was the enemy, from his point of view, he didn't feel any different, did he? He got sick every time. And his same sickness, whether I loved him or hated him, didn't affect his headache. He was still feeling the same, whether he was my enemy, my friend, or my stranger. So you just put the 3 different people there, you know, your beloved friend, your ugly politician, and the person you're so bored at you can't even look at them. So we don't care about the stranger only because they haven't affected my life. But he feels just like my enemy does. And he feels just like my friend. It's sort of obvious, but we don't like to think about it. The point of equanimity is to see that there are 3 of them, from their point of view, all want to be happy and don't want to suffer. So Nicholas wanted to be happy and didn't want to suffer equally when he was my stranger, enemy, and friend. Can you see the point? So if you look at the 3 different people, and the point of equanimity isn't we're not going to develop love yet. That comes 5 steps on. This is the foundation for developing valid love and valid compassion for all sentient beings. So what we're trying to do is radically change our reason. Right now, the reason, as we'd say, I love Nicholas is because he does what I want. He's my beloved. I don't love Nicholas anymore because he left me. And I couldn't care about Nicholas when he did neither. So that's what's irrational. And that's how we are with the universe. So all Buddha's saying is the reason we have love and don't have it is a wrong reason. Sort of Buddha's saying, Robina, just because Nicholas is kind to you is not a valid reason to love him. And that's pretty shocking when we hear that, isn't it? The reason to love Nicholas is because he wants to be happy. The reason not to love Fred, Buddha says, that's no logical reason, Robina. So we're trying to change our reason for loving people. Now our reason for love is only if you do what I want. So we're trying to make it a fundamental basis that we want to love people because they want to be happy. Because love is, may you be happy. So in equanimity, we're developing a new foundation. Do you see what I'm saying? And you're growing on top of this to the point where you actually do, this is the Bodhisattvas, have love and compassion for every single sentient being without exception. Which sounds insane, but it's got a logical basis, you know? And you can grow yourself incrementally, step by step, through these techniques. And they're using logic and analysis, clarity, to argue with ego's really entrenched views. You know? So the first thing you hear when when Nicholas left me, when I'm full of rage and hurt and grief and loss and anger and jealousy, and then someone points out that Robina, he wants to be happy, you kind of, the first thing you say is, well, excuse me, he doesn't deserve to be happy. And we base it on that. We only love a person if they deserve it, you know, which means that they're nice to me. We can't help it. It's how we are. It's how all sentient beings are. Monkeys, dogs, all the same, you know. So it's very scary to start to even recognize that the enemy wants to be happy. In other words, you've got to get yourself out of the equation, and that's what's tough. Because we can't get past the hurt that they caused. And we can't get past the boringness of the stranger, you know. So we've got to get beyond the usual labels, and to begin to see, and that's what equanimity is. The particular point of equanimity is to recognize that they are the same as each other. There's not a fraction of difference. Not a fraction of difference. And it's logical, we can see it, just that we don't like it. And then we build upon that, you know, step by step. So the next step that's built upon, I'll just go through some of them briefly. And this was just this construction of little techniques that have been cultivated over the centuries, you know, by these great yogis. Not set in stone, but they've been proven system, you know. So the next one sounds peculiar. You need to calculate it with this one. Basically, it says, basically the next little technique to think about is that all sentient beings have been my mother. What's being said here is that if we take Buddha's view, there are countless sentient beings, and they're all beginningless, and we're all in samsara, so it follows logically we bumped into each other countless times. And obviously, more precisely, they've been my mother countless times. So the point of the mother one is the next point. We want to see the kindness of the mother. We want to try and think about how the mother is kind. And which means if they've all been my mother, they've all been kind. That's the logic. So, and then the next point is to try and want to repay their kindness. So this technique is kind of weird for us. Because first of all, you know, I think, let's look at what we mean by kind. The third step, the mother is kind. I think this is not meant in the way we tend to think it. It's quite a different meaning. So I will say, when I go to the restaurant and order a chocolate cake and the waitress smiles at me and gives me an extra big piece with extra cream and then a discount, I will say, you are so kind. So in other words, we think kind means when you do what I want. In other words, when you fulfill my attachment's needs. That's what we mean by kind, which is again unbelievably self-centered. I mean, she could have been just as kind, but the cook made a terrible cake and there's only a small piece left and the price was high. I wouldn't think she's kind. So if attachment doesn't get what it wants, thank you very much, you're not kind. If attachment gets what it wants, you can be a creep. I don't care. She could have been just wanting my tip. I don't care. I'll call her kind. So our view of kind now is kind of based upon whether my attachment gets what it wants. But the meaning here is different. Well, it takes us time to think it. The meaning here is the fact, and we're using the example of a mother, because we all think of our mums, and we all know very well that our mother was not kind all the time. She was mean, and an alcoholic, or depressed, or a lazy, or selfish. We know lots of mothers, well, you know, join the human race, or just like us. But, you know, of course, when we think that our mother made us, we have this deep assumption she should be like a goddess, isn't it? I don't know why, but that's attachment. Because when you get born, you're kind of in love with your mother. So she's a goddess, you know. Really, we're in love with our mother. And then we start to discover she's normal. It's quite shocking. I remember the moment my mother started to appear to me as I began seeing fault in her. I was about 12, you know. It was a shock. Do you understand what I'm saying? It was a shock. That's attachment talking. So then it didn't take long to go run downhill, and now very soon to become my worst enemy, isn't it? Mum's evil. So because the attachment is extreme and over-exaggerates her goodness, and then when you start to, you know, when she starts to disappoint you, and then she becomes awful, and all you see is the badness now. And that's what attachment and aversion do, they exaggerate. So when you remember the bad things, it's very hard to think of your mother as kind, because it sounds like an absolute statement. But I think anyway, it's an incredible exercise to do, to remember the good things that she did do. And that means, in Buddhist view, this particular view here, it means anything that she did that basically facilitated your life. Well, she gave birth to you for a start. Now, then you'd go, especially if your mother gave you away, you'll say, well, my mother definitely was not kind. She gave me away. Well, you know, I'm sorry, you're wrong. I aborted my baby. Many mummies abort their babies. It's not being guilty, just looking. Facts. Your mother didn't abort you. She gave you away? Yep. She didn't abort you. So I think if someone saved our life out there in the traffic, we'd never forget them as long as we live, would we? We would never forget a person who saved our life. Well, your mummy didn't abort you. She saved your life. That's not a joke, it's a truth. That's a good thing to think of that your mother did, but whoever would think of this, you know? We don't. So, I mean, I think of my mother. She was a typical, unhappy, neurotic, depressed, she had a nightmarish life, not a wonderful life, but a neurotic husband who did naughty things to his daughters, and an alcoholic, and whole dramas and suffering and fights and misery and blah, you know, join the club. So I remember lots of things bad about my mother. But it's like, it doesn't mean, you know, but I start to think of the good things. I start to cry. I don't remember that many. I mean, sorry, I didn't do that for a long time. But all I've got to do now is think of the things, you know. I know as a fact that there was never a second she didn't think of her 7 children. Till the day she died, you know. I mean, anyone who's a mother knows that. Of course, she was neurotic. She did many bad things. But it doesn't mean she didn't wipe my bottom and tie my shoelaces and teach me singing and teach me cake making and teach me this and think about me and send me to school and worry about this and look after that. I mean, you can't count the things she must have done. Simple facts. It's just simple facts, and I think it's such an exercise to remember it. Because what does it do? It softens your heart. That's the point here. That's all. Not to make her a saint. Not to say she didn't do bad things. That's not the issue here. It's to remember the good things. And you know yourself, when a person only remembers the bad things you did, you know how painful it is. Because you know you did the other good things. But delusions exaggerate, you know. So it's such a good exercise for us. The mother was kind. Then, of course, the deduction is if all sentient beings have been mother, they've all been kind. So the other part, there's another in this meditation called The Mother is Kind, or The Mother is Kind, number 3. There's an A and a B. And the B is, if you like, the 3B is all sentient beings are kind to us. Well, this is even more abstract sounding, so what does it mean? But again, when we start to look at this, it's completely logical. It's scientifically true. It's just that we never think it. And it's based on the view of interdependence. But you think of, since you were conceived, every single thing that's facilitated your life, this is my way of putting it, everything that has facilitated your life has been the handiwork of sentient beings. I mean, just to begin with the conception, my mother and father worked together to get that egg and sperm, you know. This thing we think of as my body, but it's mummy's egg, daddy's sperm. Where's my body there? My consciousness barges in, you know, and they begin to grow together. So what kept me in my mother's womb for those 7 months was her thinking about it every day, her eating all the cows and the fishes and the bulls and the carrots and the tomatoes and all the creatures who died for the vegetables. So when Robina comes out at 7 months, this fully grown little body, what is this but a mountain of fishes and tomatoes and carrots and cows and bulls? Is it not? Where's my body apart from all the sentient beings my mother ate? That turned into her blood, turned into her stuff, that turned into my fingers and everything. So thank you, sentient beings. then all the clothes you put on. Since now, I mean, my socks, you know, my thing, my watch, my glasses, this thing, the cup, the paper, the cloth, the table, the heater, the floor, the lighting, the car, everything you think of, up until everything we think of that has facilitated our life. Sentient beings made it. Many sentient beings gave their life for it. This is a fact. No one can argue. But whoever thinks about this, we take it for granted. That's because why? Because attachment is running the show right now, and as long as I get what I want, I'm prepared to thank them. But, you know, it's their job. Why should I thank people? Again, it's the same one about kindness. Why should I think of the people, you know, these socks that I bought them last year in Copenhagen, and they're perfect for me. I like long navy blue socks, okay? And these ones someone gave me, they're mixed with, they're cotton and cashmere. Very nice and soft, they stay up at the top, they're just right for me, the feet are small. Usually I buy men's ones and the toes are about that big, you know. So these are fitting me perfectly. So I'm very happy when I saw these socks. So of course I thanked her in the shop. I remember buying them. Oh, thank you so much, they're perfect for me. But you know, people made them. People made the elastic and they joined the blue together with the polyester and the something and the cabin. I mean, think about it. You start going back to the factory, the people, the ones who did the typesetting on the label so I could see it was my size, the ones who designed the socks and put a little grey thing on the top here, this little touch, you know. A person thought of that. Now, the example of this is, my mother never threw away anything her 7 children gave her, did, said, drew, looked at practically. Her house was hoarding all the things that her children do. Isn't that what mothers do?
Yes.
Okay. So, and when she looked at this, you know, I always quote this, there's this crummy little drawing that her little Bobsy, I was Bobsy, did when she was 5, apparently. My mother would always talk about this little picture that Bobsy did. And it was called, I drew a pot plant. But little innocent Bobsy wrote down pop plan. You understand what I'm saying? Could you hear my point? Not a pot plant. I couldn't hear it properly. So whenever Mummy looked at this, she'd laugh. Little Bobsy, she saw it, you know. Now, if you picked that picture in a second-hand store, believe me, you wouldn't buy it. You just turn it over, a piece of rubbish, because you didn't know the person who did it, right? Because my mother looked at it, what did she see, you know? Her little heart beat, because she didn't see a boring drawing. She saw her little precious Robina's drawing. Well, that's what they say how bodhisattvas are accomplishing this meditation. Everything they see is the handiwork of their precious children, and they only want to repay their kindness. This is the level of love and compassion that they say we can cultivate. And these are the techniques that have been around for around 1,000 years. You know, simple little things. They're not like emptiness, not cosmic, not difficult. But we never think these things. So we just see everything in the world. We never think twice who made it. But if our beloved made it, look how we appreciate it. It's full of life, isn't it? It's full of, oh, look at this, you know, you thought your husband designed the Zoom something. Every time you look at it, you have such attachment and be so precious, and anybody insulted be offended, isn't it? Well, that's what we're talking here, except we're talking about pure compassion. Everything they talk about the bodhisattva called always crying one. He just would see anything and he'd burst into tears, because it reminded him of the precious people who made it. It's an incredible technique to open your heart, you know. You just have to remember when you see something you don't like. Like, I'm into design, okay? I like design. That's why I love, say, Apple products. I'm a great fan of Steve Jobs. I love Steve Jobs, okay? So I totally appreciate his design. So I'm prepared to be thankful. I think of them all who designed them. I love people who think things through, you know, and design it beautifully for people you can see. But especially if I meet something that I don't like the design of, I'm not going to thank the people. So you understand what I'm saying? So you should, as equally. Just as my attachment's made happy. But like, you know, this, whatever. This, you know, I wouldn't appreciate this design much. It's not too bad, I suppose. It doesn't grab me. So I don't care about Mr. Zoom, you know. But it's the same thing, isn't it? No difference. Sentient beings made it. They worked in the factory and they designed, they came up with a thing, and the person who designed the little mesh here thought of the best way to do it, and the curve here, and this person designed this, and the one who designed the type, the font, and the person who designed the little red light here. And do you see my point? Every bit of it didn't fall out of a tree. It came out of a human being's mind. I mean, we should be weeping already. It's very powerful, this one. We just got to do it, that's all. We don't do it because we don't care, because we see everything through the filter of it suits me or not. Because attachment's running the show right now. So these are incredible little techniques. They're not like emptiness. They seem easy to understand, but actually they're harder to do because ego doesn't want to, doesn't care. We just, see everything through the filter of if it satisfies my needs. So this is so powerful. Can you hear? You can see the truth of it. No one can argue with this. No one can argue that people design that thing, And then we think, what do you mean they're kind? It's their job. That's not the point. It's the fact that they did it. The fact that they did it. Human beings try to do their jobs nicely,
We paid for it.
Pardon?
We can say also I paid for it.
So what's that prove?
No, but I mean we don't.
What's the
think
point
so.
of it? Oh, that's what we think you mean, yeah. We
Yeah.
think we deserve it.
Yeah,
We pay
we
for
deserve
it.
it because
That's
I
right.
paid for
That's
it.
what the way we think now,
Yes.
through attachment. This one is just seeing the bare thing produced by humans, the handiwork of humans, That's all. It's the handiwork of sentient beings. Not just humans, many beings die. Even for your vegetables. Countless creatures die for your vegetables. This kind of thing. So it's very powerful. This is number 3, B. All sentient beings are kind. So the next point is like a conclusion. I must repay their kindness. People go on for years doing these meditations, using logic to ego with ego's entrenched misconceptions. So all of the practices of these, whether it's emptiness or compassion, they're both the same. You're using your head to argue. This is a particular approach. I think we have this big misconception that when we think of the compassion meditations, we're supposed to sort of sit down and kind of force a feeling of compassion. That's superstitious. It's foolish. You can't do that. These techniques, you sit down and you do an equanimity meditation. So you visualize friend, enemy, stranger. And then you might take 1 or 2 or 3 arguments, like we're talking in a casual way, to use to think it through. And then the conclusion is, you look in the face of this enemy, you want to be happy, just like my friend, and you feel it. That's the conclusion. You do this and you build it up every day. It's using your thoughts, though. It's using intelligence. And then the feeling comes from that. Just kind of gooey feeling in your part that you have. You might get any feeling. I don't care. You use logic. You're using logic to argue with ego's entrenched misconceptions. And this is what you're doing from A to Z. This is what you're doing with emptiness, and it's what you're doing with compassion. And then the feeling of compassion is what comes when you break down the barriers. You have this feeling of empathy with others, a feeling of love, compassion. And these are very specific steps one goes through, We communicating?
Yeah.
So there's a series of other little techniques, and then we get to the one called, I'm jumping now, to the one called Tonglen, giving, taking. This technique is cultivated over the centuries that I think has come from, some of you will be familiar with a text called the 8 Verses, by Langri Tangpa. So let's get that. Has anyone's got that? See if I've got it here. Anybody got that text in front of them? Langri Tangpa. Let me see if I can find it. Put it somewhere. This is a classic text by one Indian yogi who was a student of Tongpa, who was a student of Atisha, who began this tradition of the practices, and who, and I think from his 8 verses, this practice came. I can't find it. Oh no, sorry. Contents, here we go. Go away. Contents, enable. Alright. 8 verses. Indexing, processing. So that is a job. I love Steve Jobs, and I started separately died. So my feeling is Apple's going to collapse eventually because nobody's got a brain like his. They're still resting on their laurels and on the work he did. That's my opinion. I just didn't care about life. Oh, check, what's this? No, it's not there. It's coming, I'll find it in a minute. 8 verses. No, it's not there. It's taking time. Too slow, forget it. So I'll just remember some
We
of the
have
verses.
8 verses and 49 slogans on the wall. Here, written.
8 verses and
Up
what?
there. Is it? No,
8 verses and what?
No, the slogans. We have a
Och så är
group.
det på kortvägen.
Is it in English?
Yes.
Men
7 points of mind training.
No, it's
No.
the 8 verses of mind training. Different trick.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, darling. I'll remember some of the verses. Okay, what it is by this Lungri Tampa fellow, and again, like these verses, because they sound so simple, we just gloss over them and don't take them seriously. They're really quite outrageous. Like the very first one says, when we're with others, we should see ourselves. Oh, this is the second verse, sorry. When lowest of all, and to see others as supreme. Now you give this to one therapist who's dealing with a person who's got a victim mentality, who's got a bully husband. They will sue Buddhism for saying that, if they could. It sounds like shocking advice, right? Because this is where the things we're not used to thinking. That all these spiritual teachings are gradual. That's why you've got to, as Babaka Rinpoche says, you've got to be a suitable vessel to even listen to that piece of advice. And who is a suitable vessel is a person who's done the wisdom wing. If you've controlled your body, controlled your speech, take responsibility, know that you're the cause of your own suffering, giving up attachment, and become a marvellous, self-content, wise, fulfilled person who is accountable, you are now ready to do that. But a person who's in a victim mentality, who's overwhelmed by suffering, who's completely full of fear, and who blames and is angry and depressed, that person can't hear this piece of advice. But because we tend to think all religious teachings are like in one big glob, they're not gradual. But this is an intensely high teaching. So you've got to hear it properly. It's outrageous in normal Western terms. To see yourself as the lowest of all. I mean, we'll go, well, excuse me, I already do that. What do you want from me, you know? Do you understand? But we've got to hear, it's just not what's being said. It's so completely different from the usual way we think of things. And then the one even worse, to see other people as superior. I mean, it sounds like kind of Hitler. So we really got to understand it. It's just, so what it means is you're this person who's really done the wisdom wing to an incredible degree. You've already got incredible levels of compassion and equanimity and God knows what, and you really want to smash the deepest levels of ego that are preventing you from truly putting others first. This is so high. I mean, when I first heard these teachings, I thought these people were mad talking like this. I was almost scared to say the words. Emptiness seems to be much easier than this stuff. It's outrageous. Don't underestimate these words, please. We say them so easily. We say all these holy words. You know, when you say, you ever do Guru Puja, any of you people? Guru Puja, Lama Sherpa? You do? You don't? Like in there it says, you know, even though all sentient beings kill me, hate me, I will only work in return for the abuse. When we say these words, may I benefit all sentient beings. I mean, be careful what you're saying. Are you sort of communicating here with me? They're outrageous teachings. These teachings about body teaching. They're the highest teachings you could wish for. These teachings of exchanging self for others were kept secret for hundreds of years in Tibet, because they're said to be so advanced. It's true. But hear it with the real meaning, you know. So my feeling is a really excellent way to start with this one of see yourself as the lowest of all is very interesting. So you look at us, you know, fairly nice people with nice friends and blah, blah, blah. Well, here we have, we've all got pride. We don't think we've got pride. It sounds very extreme to say pride. But if we have low self-esteem, we have pride. We talked about this yesterday, didn't we?
Yeah.
So really, it's like, and it doesn't have to be the whole of you is important. You know, I know when I did Kung Fu, I'm embarrassed to admit this now, but I couldn't even talk about it before, I didn't admit it. I was really arrogant about my feet. I'd always check, you know, we've got naked feet in Kung Fu, haven't you? You've got bare feet. So I'm always checking feet. And I always have got this arrogance about my feet, that they're the best Kung Fu feet. Short, sort of solid, and small toes, and I can do a really good Kung Fu foot, you know. I'd always be arrogant about my feet. I'd never admit it. You never would admit it to anybody. You know, especially, you know, you're into your body. You look at people who've got better, you know, like you've got a nicer waist, or your eyelashes are longer, your earlobes are better, or your legs are better shaped. I mean, the most pathetic things. You're slightly more intelligent. You know more about, you know, French. We take one small part of us that we are good at, and then and what pride does is overinflate its importance, and then we paint ourselves with that brush. We all do it. all the time. And what happens is, when I meet a person who's got better feet, I'm going to go, oh, my feet are so pathetic. Now I'm low self-esteem. Because pride wants to be the best and doesn't like it when other people are better, and you feel kind of all puffed up. But it's more subtle than that. We don't think of it as gross as that, but it's sneaking away there. And the other thing is, because of attachment and this pride, all the time we're seeing other people, we're always judging. And it's so embarrassing to admit. Even you've got your best friend, and you're talking to her, you know, and she's talking, and you're saying, you're smiling at her and listening, but you're saying to yourself, well, she's talking a bit much today, isn't it? Or, you know, oh, her lipstick's a bit red, or she's getting a bit fatter, or she's got double chin, but you're smiling at her, listening. But the mind is always finding fault. And often the faults we find, if you look at the way we ordinarily talk and listen to ordinary people, all the time we're pointing out things about ourselves or pointing a person down and ourselves up. Always referring to others, criticising, comparing. It's never so subtle. It's never really gross. But it's always there in our thoughts, you know. So for me, one of the most simple things to do when you're in a group, like this group, you remember the people, do it when you go home. Even just to think of one thing about each person that's better than yours, that, you know, nicer ears, prettier feet, more intelligent, better English, clearer understanding of emptiness, a thinner waist. I mean, anything that you're proud of, think of someone else as something better than you. It's a very powerful practice, very simple, in your own mind, quietly. It's already a good start, you know, because the delusions are so. Keep remembering that delusions in their nature are liars, and in their nature are I-based. In their nature, they're putting me first. In their nature, they put me up. Equally, then they'll exaggerate my bad. But then that's self-obsession too. Depression is self-obsession, just like arrogance is. We don't like to hear this. So it's finding something good about somebody else. It's so profound, it's so simple. It doesn't occur to us, you know. Don't understand it, really. It's very wonderful. I think I mentioned this. When someone asked, was it here? The antidote to pride. When you feel yourself being proud, just remind yourself of something you can't do. And when you're feeling a bit low self-esteem, remind yourself of something you can do. It's so simple, it's embarrassing, but it's a completely marvellous technique. So whenever I feel myself being proud, or I catch it, all I have to think of is I can only speak English, and I'm quiet. I'm silent. I speak no other language, you know, and I'm embarrassed. I've got 47 countries every year, and I speak English. You know. I tried to speak German one year when I was in uni at the centre. All my friends said, Robina, your German is beautiful. You just don't have much of it, that's all. You know, my lazy Anglo-Saxon mouth. So especially Tibetan, one of my lamas would always speak to me in Tibetan, just to show me I couldn't speak Tibetan. I'm lazy, I just didn't do it. So as soon as I'm feeling arrogant, I just remember I can only speak English, and I'm quiet. It stops me immediately, I tell you. Right there, I'm humbled. Do you understand? So when you feel a bit low self-esteem, you've got to catch it and tell yourself something you can do. But the trouble is with low self-esteem, we don't want to remember anything we can do, because we don't think we can do anything well. But it's very profound to do it. It's so helpful. Kind of balance the books, you know. See yourself as low as the wall. Incredible. That's intense. And this is what I find very surprising. You know, when you think about the Dalai Lama, he's incredibly powerful, charismatic, isn't he? He touches people in an incredible way. I remember this when I first had a real contact with him, which was in 82. And Lama Yeshe was so wonderful. Lama Yeshe invited His Holiness to Europe, to Italy, Spain, France, Germany, a few countries. And other people were inviting as well. But Lama appointed, it was amazing, he appointed 10 of us to be security guards for His Holiness. And he was so outrageous, he appointed 5 women. That was unheard of back then, in 82. And 3 of us were nuns. Gun, you know the Swedish nun, Gun.
Yes.
Well, me and Gun, and a third one called Sylvia, German. They were both nuns there. Lama appointed us to be the security guards, along with 5 boys, 3 of them from Switzerland actually. It was very funny, Swiss guards, it was very funny. So 5 men and 5 women, and Lama made us wear uniforms. So I had hair at the time, I was working in London for Wisdom, so he made us wear these little uniforms, and these little green skirts, green like tartan, we call tartan, you know, in English, and then a little yellow blouse and a maroon jacket. So I remember, I was thinking, I've got to look like a lady, you know, so my friend Susanna took me to some shops in Milan, and I bought these nice full-length nice leather maroon boots, and I wore lipstick. I decided I should wear lipstick and look like a proper lady, you know. So I remember Lama Yeshe would always laugh when he'd see me, and he'd say, "Oh, I think I like you better like that." And then Geshe Rabchen, one of my lamas, who's passed away now, he looked at me and he said, "Are you still a nun?" Anyway, the point is, we just, the 10 of us, we travelled with this holiday. It was incredible. For 6 weeks, you know, on the aeroplanes, we'd guard his hotel door, we'd stand at the teaching looking like serious guards. You know. His guards were so kind to us. I mean, we didn't really do a job properly, the serious guards there, you know. But it was very amazing. What I'm getting at is just to watch the response that he had on people, the effect he had on people. This in '82. It was probably his 2nd or 3rd visit to Europe, you know. It wasn't well known. But I was blown out when I saw it. He just would walk by and people be in tears, and people, I mean, I remember in Barcelona, the room was like packed double with people, and all these sort of middle-aged, middle-class Spanish ladies with their handbags and gloves walking in, you know, looking really proper ladies, kind of looking for something, looking at the Dalai Lama, you know, people in tears and happy to see him. I remember the mayor of Rome, still an Italian Catholic. This is the greatest day of my life. I remember in Spain, when he'd go to the monasteries, we ladies weren't allowed in, you know, only the men. It was okay, what you do. But we were, like, I remember one of the monasteries, one of these really strict monasteries, the Carthusians, where they pray day and night, you know. And he spent several hours in there, and Lama Yeshe was there, and the boy guards were allowed in. We girls had to stay outside. When they came out, these monks were like blissful, beaming from ear to ear, holding his hand, and apparently they had these incredible conversations about emptiness, the absolute. I mean, they couldn't get enough of it, you know. Everywhere you looked, you could see the effect he had on people. But he was so humble, so unassuming. So what it really strikes me, when you think of a person who's very charismatic, you think of a person who's arrogant. Or you think, they must know they're powerful. And yet, when you see him, and as he says, everyone I meet is my best friend. He's incredible. People in Australia, 96 FPMT invited him to Australia. About 2 months, Carl Chakra, a whole bunch of things. And I did it when I was working for Mandela. We did a special issue to celebrate the event, and I interviewed all these people, about 50 people who had been involved with it, the press, the television people, the police, the guards. Everybody said the same thing. They've never met a person like him. He touched their hearts completely. People in tears. It was extraordinary to see it. And what I'm meaning is, there he is, powerful, and you know he's powerful. He doesn't walk around all humble. He's powerful. When you see him at press conferences, he knows exactly what's going on. He'll walk into a press conference and he'll completely run the whole thing, and within 5 minutes the whole thing's over and everybody's looking kind of dazed, you know, because he ran the show, you know. He doesn't sit there patiently waiting to be told what to do. He's a boss, but he's humble, unbelievably, like, there's no sense that there would be, if he is what he is, there is not a fraction of a sense of I that's separate from others, but powerful. So, you know, when we think of humble, is what I'm getting at, we think of kind of like a little mouse. But it's wrong, because this is the point too of these teachings, like see yourself as the lowest of all. The person who's qualified to see themselves as the lowest of all in the best way is a person who's got self-confidence. Humility is a quality of a person who's self-confident. Low self-esteem is a quality of a person who's got no self-confidence. Do you understand what I mean? We see it this way, you know. We have to be really understanding these teachings properly, getting behind the meaning. Even when you have renunciation, which is the first stages of practice, renunciation already sounds forbidding, you know, like you're boring, you don't love anything, you don't like anything, you're giving up everything. It's completely mistaken. If you're renounced, you've seen how disgusting delusions are and how much pain they cause you. That's renunciation. Nothing to do with compassion yet. Which means you've got incredible self-respect, incredible confidence. You're a happy person when you've got renunciation. Don't misunderstand it. So the next verse says something like each one gets more difficult and more outrageous. But one of the verses says, it's something like, for people who've been mean to you, gone against you, criticised you, you'll see them as your, I forget the exact words, I'm confusing two of them. So one of them is just general. Oh, no, sorry. One of them is says, when you see people of wicked nature, they translate it. And I think, well, what's a better word for that? That's called psychopaths. That's the word we use in the modern day, wouldn't it? A psychopath. I mean, a person of wicked nature sounds like a fairy story, doesn't it? But a psychopath. Get the point, please. When you see psychopaths, intensely suffering people, you will feel like you found the most precious treasure. So you've got to interpret that, please. You get my point? Don't misunderstand it. What it means is, what we're trying to do is smash all semblance of self-centeredness, attachment, ego grasping, selfishness, and we're trying to see how all sentient beings are suffering. And a psychopath is a person who should break our heart, the depth of their misery and suffering, and the intensity of the suffering they're causing themselves for countless eons of lives. They all say that when you've got bodhicitta, bodhisattvas have more compassion for the crazies. You think of some disaster like, the two towers falling down, that one. They would have more compassion for the pilots. Because why? It's logical. Because they're just going to begin countless lives of unbearable suffering. The people who got slaughtered just finished their karma. This is not how we think in the world. And the other point is this. Compassion is impossible without renunciation. You've got to have renunciation first. That's why it's gradual. And why is very logical. What renunciation is, it's got two parts, okay? Two things. The first part of renunciation is, I am sick of suffering. I am up to here with suffering. And of course that means the suffering, the suffering of change, which is all the delusions and the attachment, which is the worst one, and then the deepest suffering, all pervasive suffering. Have you gone into these properly? When you really understand the depths of suffering, and then the second one is, and this is where you get the bullseye, now you know why you are suffering. Because of your past insane karma and your terrible, terrible suffering to you. That's why you're suffering. So when you know that you're suffering and you're sick of it, and you know the causes, and you have these two, that's renunciation. Because the simple conclusion is, I must get the hell out of this nightmare. So once you've got that for yourself, that's exactly what compassion is, except the objects are others. You go, oh my God, look at that suffering. And that includes the victims and the oppressors. Because the victims were the oppressors of last life, and the oppressors will be the victims of this life. It just goes on and on. So you see the whole world and you go, look at that suffering. It is unbearable. But now you know why they're suffering. Because of their karma and their delusions. Right now, with the dualistic worldly view, we feel sorry for some people. They're called children and animals, if we're lucky. They're called innocent victims. Because the view we have in the world is that the cause of their suffering is the wicked, the naughty ones, So we love to have compassion for a few victims, and then we love to hate the people who harm them. Which is why I think in our world we have such compassion for the only, listen to this, only for the animals that humans harm. We don't worry about how the lions rip the guts out of buffaloes for breakfast. We don't worry about the rats and the creatures and all the wild animals slaughtering each other every day. We don't care about that. We call that natural. We just want to get mad at somebody. So we get mad at humans who might upset a little poodle. I mean, you see my point. I know. Humans do terrible things to animals. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be misleading. You get my point here? Yeah. We never think twice. In fact, we call it wild, nature, and we'll bring the children in to look at the slaughterhouse while the lion rips out the buffaloes for breakfast. And we'll say, oh, that's nature, darling. But you get a human in to rip a dog to pieces like that and tell the children it's nature, they'll sue you. But what's the difference? Sentient beings harming each other. So we're really so ridiculous, So we only have compassion for some people based on attachment, that's all. It's just ridiculous. So here, with renunciation, you've understood what suffering is, all levels of it. You understand what causes it, and you've gone beyond it, you're an incredible being. Now you're wide-eyed open to see the suffering of every single sentient being. We're all in this nightmare together. All of us, every one of us, creating our own suffering. That's the basis of our compassion. Then it's easy to have compassion for every single sentient being. Therefore, it's easy to have compassion for the psychopaths. But of course, you put them in prison. We have compassion, we go, the poor thing can't help it. You know, we think we're very sentimental. No. Compassion is on the basis of seeing someone causing suffering because of their incredible delusions. The next verse gets more personal. Those who have harmed you, brutalized you, gone against you, blamed you, feel like you found your guru. The beloved. I mean, I just think that suffering that so many partners have is unbelievable. I can't even imagine, because, all the sentimental view of romantic and everything, you give your entire life, every atom of your being to this other person, there's not a single secret about you that you haven't given them over to this person, and then they say, bye darling, leaving you. Can't believe it, Or, with parents. Children go against parents, blame their parents, hate their parents. You can only imagine the grief, the pain, the loss of that one, and being that one, and then loving that person like you found a precious treasure. This is outrageous. Brave, courageous, you can't even imagine. Because all we're trying to do here in all these verses, the whole point of the 8 verses, the whole point of this, all of the practices, which get to verse 7, which is Tonglen, is to use every radical means to rip out ego-grasping, attachment, and self-cherishing, to the point where eventually you actually reverse the entire thing, and you have infinite love and compassion for every other sentient being. You put all of them first. I mean, it's beyond insane. And that's what Tom means. You practice taking it upon yourself, the suffering of others. In other words, rather me than them. And you practice giving your happiness to others. People do these retreats for years and years and years. And this is what culminates in this bodhicitta. Time to go on. Any questions? So the 2 wings have to go together. So this is the point here, like I said in the beginning. This wisdom of emptiness is a Hinayana teaching, okay? You've got to realize it to achieve your own liberation, which is Hinayana. So in its nature, it belongs as a Hinayana teaching. It's taught at the level of the Hinayana because you realize emptiness and then you get out of your own samsara. But in the Mahayana, it's taught in the context of the final stages of the Bodhisattva path, which is the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva. So that's the wisdom is called the perfection of wisdom here because it's combined with bodhicitta. So the addition of all the love and compassion teachings of bodhicitta is what gives infinite more power to the realization of emptiness here. And the realization of emptiness here gives infinite power to the compassion and bodhicitta. So each informs the other. You can't have one without the other. You could not have fully developed bodhicitta without emptiness, and you could not have fully developed wisdom without bodhicitta. Bird needs 2 wings. And you can see, the emphasis in the wisdom wing is all about sorting out your own mess. So every time you lessen delusions, it increases your love and compassion, doesn't it? And every time you practice love and compassion, it lessens ego grasping. So they immediately help each other. But the direct antidote to compassion is to selfishness is bodhicitta, and the direct antidote to ego grasping is wisdom. You've got to do the direct antidotes, but each helps the other. You have to understand this. Can't have one without the other. In fact, you can have compassion on bodhicitta, but you can lose it until you realize emptiness. You'll never get out of samsara, ever, until you realize emptiness. You'll never quit suffering altogether, ever, until you realize emptiness. Yes, no.
It's not a question. But maybe Lu Jung, you are talking about Lu Jung.
Huh?
When you speak about Tonglen, it's also called Lu Jung.
No, Lojong means mind training,
Yeah.
and it is the broad category of practices and teachings of which Tonglen is the main practice. In
Right.
this whole tradition of teaching.
Yeah.
Lojong means mind training, and it's this whole genre of practices that include all the teachings about exchanging self for others, the essential practice of which is Tonglen.
Yes. I also know, but I mean, we have been doing this since 2005, at least once a month.
Which Tonglen?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So we have this mindfulness, training the mind.
Good.
And so I hope that people who wants to come,
Fantastic.
could come.
Great. Good. Any other questions, people, points to bring up? Things to ask before we finish? Before we all leave each other? Oh? Happy campers? Yes, Nicholas. I'm not happy. Please ask your question. I'm very happy to answer.
When can we see more of you? When do you come back?
Johnny, I can't. I've looked at my calendar. And I can't come back because we were discussing it until. Yeah. Until. I can't go back to Europe until August 2016. I can't help it. I try to fit everything in, it just doesn't fit. I go to like 60 centres a year in all the different continents, and I just can't fit everything in. I try my best, I promise.
If we can come to you.
You can come to me, yeah, somebody like. You look at my schedule, RobinaCourtin.com, apparently there's a schedule there. Because I just go to, I go to Australia a few months, and then Europe, and then Asia, and then America. I go to take these round the world tickets, So anyway, yeah, there you go. August 2016.
But we will keep in touch.
Huh?
We will keep in touch
Of course.
until we know when.
No, absolutely, darling, of course.
That would be
I mean, yeah, for sure.
Yes.
I'll be coming to Europe about the first week of August, and I'll be here about August, September, and I go on pilgrimage. I should do some advertisements. I did these pilgrimages to India and Nepal, these wonderful pilgrimages for about 3 weeks to all the holy places of Lord Buddha. And they raise money for the prison project, So the next one I'm doing is February, coming up now, really full. And the one after that is October. No, the one is February, another one again February 2016, and then October 2016, I think. And they go to all the holy places. We start in Kathmandu, and it's a very, very special experience. People just love these pilgrimages. Go to the places that Buddha put his own holy feet, Very special, very, very special. So we do those. And that's all. That's my first. So yeah, but yeah. So I'm in Europe now. I'm here now. I think I'm going to be in Finland next week, Copenhagen tomorrow, and Finland next week, and in France for 2 weeks. I'll do a 10-day retreat in our centre in France, near Toulouse. It's a residential place, a lovely centre, very nice. We like to do retreats. It's a lovely, lovely place. They have such good courses there, just near Toulouse. It's a beautiful old place. It used to belong to the family of the Toulouse-Lautrec. Big old palace, old castle. And I'll be there for 10 days. And then I'm going to be in Italy for 3 weeks in January.
Where?
Italy?
Where in Italy?
Oh, Pisa, Venice, Livorno, about 6 different centres. I think the schedule must be up on the, I haven't seen my schedule yet, they haven't let me know. A few places. And then in January, February I'll be in India, and then March I'll be in UK, about 8 centres, 10 centres in the UK, Scotland and England, but no retreats, just like weekend things. And then after that we'll be in Holland and Russia and Latvia and a few places like that. Until about May. And then I'll be in Australia. And then I'll be in America. Like that. I go around the world on these tickets, you see. Like these
But
round
where
world.
do you live?
At the moment I don't have a home. Literally. I have a little bag, 1 set of robes, my iPad, and that's all. I have no home anywhere. At the moment. my little bag. I live on aeroplanes. I sound peculiar, I know, but it's true at the moment. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We do a couple of prayers first to finish, okay? I want to read these verses of Shantideva. A few verses of Shantideva that His Holiness the Dalai Lama has selected that he likes a lot. Lama's Opus translation, he got his own style to translate. I'll just read them as our dedication, that we become these holy beings, like all these marvelous lamas we know, and we have the courage to have the attitude of the Bodhisattva, which is to never give up. But if we don't do it, who will? That's the attitude, the courageous attitude of the Bodhisattva. So let me just read these few verses of our dedication. Just read out, so make these your thoughts, have the aspiration. Again, we're outrageous, like people can do what they like with me. If they kill me, it doesn't matter. This kind of idea is so outrageous. Okay, so for the sake of completing the welfare of all sentient beings, without any sense of loss, I give up my body, enjoyments, and wealth, as well as all virtues of the three tones. By renouncing all, go beyond suffering. My mind achieves the non-abiding, sorrowless state, enlightenment. And once I get up altogether, it's best to give away all for sentient beings. I give up this body comfortably as they want, to all sentient beings, however is comfortable for them to use, always killing, criticizing, beating, and so forth. They may do whatever they like. Sentient beings play with my body, ridicule and make fun of me. As I have already given it to them, why do I go against this? Let the sentient beings be allowed to do any action that doesn't do harm to them. Whoever encounters me, may it never be meaningless for them. Just by looking at me, anyone who gets angry or has a devotional thought arise, may that mind alone become the cause to accomplish all the welfare of those living beings. Any being who criticizes me, puts me down, or anyone who gives harm, like that, even making fun of me behind my back, may all become fortunate to achieve great enlightenment. May I become a saviour for those who are guideless, a guide for those who enter the road, a boat, a ship, a bridge for those who wish to cross over a great river to the dry land. May I be an island for those seeking an island, a light for those desiring light, bedding for those desiring a place to rest. Sentient beings who desire a slave, may I become a slave of all. May I become a wish-granting jewel, a wish-fulfilling vase, powerful mantra and great medicine, a wish-fulfilling tree, a wish-granting cow for those sentient beings. May I become the great elements, the earth, and like the forever boundless sky, may I become the cause of living of the innumerable sentient beings. Like that, towards the realm of sentient beings who equal the limit of the sky, may I become a cause of living always until the non-abiding, sorrowless state is achieved. As long as space exists, as long as sentient beings exist, may I too abide and eliminate the sufferings of sentient beings. And so we think all these seeds we planted, remember every single thought we have had that we've been together has gone into the mind. It doesn't go astray. These seeds don't disappear. So even if we don't remember most of it, it doesn't matter. All these seeds have gone in. So that we think, may we nourish these seeds with our effort and our virtue and our practice every single day, so that these seeds will ripen in the future, in our Buddhahood, just as we motivate it, no matter how long it takes. So that we'll be qualified to effortlessly benefit sentient beings, just like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, how precious lamas. Shang Chud Sem Chog Rinpoche Maki panam ke guchi, ke panyam pa me payam, gong ne gong du kavasho. All right, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
I'm going to send this document to Katja, and you're very welcome to have it. And anybody you ever feel like emailing me, I'm not saying you have to, but you're very welcome. Very happy to answer questions.
We from the Association for Tibetan Buddhism are very grateful for your wonderful teachings, and we truly hope you come back. And 2016, we hope.
Yes.
Really, so we keep in touch, and thank you so much for planting the virtuous seeds in our mind.
Good.
We need it so much. Thank you very
We
much.
all do. Thank you so much for this Katja. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
And also to just to tell you, inform you, in June, 12th to 14th of June, Geshe Tashet Seri from Jamyang Center in London, FPNT, will come to teach, continue to teach on emptiness meditation, how to deconstruct the body and similar things, to see where is the I, using the Lamrim middle version of Lama Tsongkhapa's, especially written for meditators. So this will be a little bit, of course he will explain things, but it will be also practical exercises to help you, to guide you to correctly meditate on emptiness, because like Venerable Robina said, it's not just to wishy-washy think, it's, you need to be very precise and know how to go on, and have right tools and intelligence and all these things.
Perfect, Katja.
Yes,
Well done.
thank you so much.
Yes. Good mark, sir.
Sorry?
Oh yeah, this yeah. Anyway, I must get my movies in them. There we go.
You want to?
Benefits my body teacher trust. If you want to buy new movies, that's good. All right, my dears, all of you. I'm so happy to meet you all. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.